Welcome back to a new video, and on this occasion is the SSL 9000J from Brainworks and Plugin Alliance. If you like this, please like and subscribe. This channel is supported by viewers only. If you want to buy me a coffee to say thanks and help the channel keep going on, you can. You have links in the description for PayPal, YouTube Thanks, and Patreon. Right from the start, this plugin will cut a little bit of the super lows. And this is because the dynamic section is on. If you turn it off, it's completely flat. Right, so let's do some drumming and start with the filters. If I go right here and start moving something, nothing happens because I need to turn it on. If I turn on the high pass filter, we can cut from 20 Hz all the way up to 600 Hz. Also, you have the multiplier. If you click it, instead of going from 20 Hz, you can start from 60s, but you can go higher up to 1.8K. You have the same deal with the low pass filter. You start from 60, then you go down all the way down to 3.0K. And instead of having a multiplier, you can do the same thing with the divider. It will start higher or lower, in this case, from 20K all the way up to 1K. But always remember that you need to turn it on in order to make this happen. And if you turn it off, of course, it's going to go away. We are going to talk about the dynamic section in a couple of minutes. Coming up next, it's going to be the EQ. If I do some drumming, always remember that it means high frequencies, high mid frequencies, low mid frequencies, and low frequencies. So everything starts right here at the top. You can boost your signal, and as you boost with this EQ, you have a tiny little dip right here. You can go from all the way from 1.5 up to 22K. By default, this one works as a shelf, but you can just click it and make it a bell if you must. Right. So I'm gonna go and do Control-click to go back to defaults and leave it a shelf. With this one, the high mid frequency, you can boost, and of course it's going to be a little bit lower than here because you can go from 600 Hz all the way to 7K. And with this control, you can maybe go right here and you can make the Q narrow or just make it wider. And this is something very common for SSL type of channels. Another thing that you can do, just like we did with the filters, you can multiply this. If you go start from 600, if you click it, now you're going to be starting from 1.8K all the way up to 21. And of course, if you boost the other one, you can, make a nice combination, a nice little blend. All right, so I'm going to go back to defaults, and the next control is going to be the low mid frequency. And this one will start all the way from 200, really low, all the way up to 2.5K. Now with these controls, you need to really be aware that if you boost maybe just a tiny little bit, is more than enough. It's a pretty aggressive type of EQ. If you go all the way right here, you're boosting 10 dBs. Still, it sounds musical, but you're doing quite a lot. And on this one, you can go from, again, 200 all the way to 2.5K. But if you use the divider, you can go from low 67 all the way to 833. And this control is the same. You can make the Q narrow or wide because you get the idea. And if you go back to defaults, then, and as you can see, they're pretty much the same. But then if we go to the low frequencies, it's pretty much the same as the high frequencies. We can boost, and then we start from 40 all the way to 600. It's a shelf by default, and when you click it, it's going to be a bell. Now, if you're confused in which mode you are, whatever the button says, it's what it is. If it says bell, it's a bell. If it's a shelf, it's going to be a shelf. All right. So now, I guess we need to talk about the button that we have right here. When this button is on, it makes the EQ work a little bit different. It's a variation based on the 242E series. If I do maybe a little bit of boost and maybe a tiny little boost, maybe on the lower frequencies, gonna go even lower and make it narrow. Notice that we have this tiny little cut and how everything looks. If I click it, it's going to look way, way different. How the E works is that the gain, the Q, and the pretty much the curves are just, completely different. You lose a tiny little bit of curve when you go to the E right here, when you're doing the shelf. But it's not there anymore. And the E is narrow by nature. That is the difference between the Q right here. Now the E, what it does is gonna make it wider when you boost more. So if I stay here, maybe I'm gonna click and go back to defaults. If I boost this one, while boost is gonna go wider. The other mode doesn't care how much we are boosting; it's always wide. So the wideness or the Q is just relative to your boost, how much you're boosting or cutting. This is the main difference with the E. And right here again, it's cool that you have two different flavors that you can choose from. Now I'm gonna go back to reset and we need to talk about the split and the pre because they are really important. By default, when you start with a new preset, it means that the filter comes first, then the dynamics, and then the EQ. But all this is decided by the buttons, the split, and the pre. Now, first, let's start with the split. The split will decide the position of the filter and the EQ. When this one is on, the filter comes first, and then comes the EQ. And in the middle, the dynamics, of course. But when this one is off, then it changes. The EQ comes first and then come the filters. And if we include the dynamics, in this case, the dynamics comes first, then it's going to be the EQ and then it's going to be the filter. So this is the split. It decides the position between the filter and the EQ, who comes first. Then we need to talk about the pre. The pre decides where the dynamics sections go. If pre is on, it means that the dynamics section comes before the EQ. And if pre is off, it's going to go after the EQ. So the EQ comes first and then everything else. But also you need to think about the combinations between the split and the pre. So again, the only thing that the pre decides is where the dynamic goes, but all of this depends on where the split is in terms of the filter. And like I said before, when you start a new preset, the split is on, filter comes first, then the dynamics because it's before the EQ, and then the EQ. If I turn off this, first comes the filter because split is on, then comes the EQ, and then comes the dynamics. But if I turn everything off, now everything is just different. First is the EQ, then the filters, and then the dynamics. So again, you have a lot of possible combinations right here. And everything will change when we talk about the dynamic sidechain or the sidechain right here, because these buttons will put the EQ or the filters within the sidechain. But again, we're going to talk about that later. In the case of the EQ, when you click this button, it's going to remove or turn off the EQ section. This plugin is an emulation of a console, so by default you get an emulated type of saturation. And this is what we get by default. We get the low noise floor right here, and then this is a representation of the harmonics that we get. Now again, this is not a distortion plugin, it's just a little bit of saturation. You can control your harmonics a little bit more with the THD, which means total harmonic distortion. If I go down on this knob, on this tiny little screw, if we go down, we get nothing because this is the default value that you get, but we can boost it and get a different flavor. So that we are just doing more saturation pretty much. Now if I play it back, and I go all the way up on this one, you just get a little bit more saturation, that's all. And it always depends on the material that you're trying to mix. Just a little bit more. But again, this is not a distortion or saturation plugin. You're going to get a tiny little bit. Now, if you use many instances of this on different channels, if you crank it up, you're going to start noticing. So maybe if you want a little bit more, you just do a tiny little bit and not go all the way in. Now then we need to talk about the in gain and the V gain. If your signal is too hot or maybe too low, this will be the input of your plugin. If I go down, it goes low, and if I crank it up, it's gonna go loud. Now then you have the V gain. Now the V gain is this noise that you have right here. Again, this is an emulation of a console. So, you have a little bit of low level noise, and it's very low. You can not even hear it. But if you want to crank it up, you can go all the way up. Or if you want to bring it down, you can go down if you want to. Now, something that you need to know, if you crank it up, right now it's not very noticeable, let's say. You cannot hear it. But if you use many instances of this plugin and you crank it up every single time, at the end when you compress your master bus, you're going to start noticing that noise. So you need to handle this with care. Click, control click to go back to the center. This works for all the controls. If you have multiple instances of this plugin, you can boost the V gain and the THD for all the instances on your session. This is why you have these buttons at the top. And then you have your face and your mute. If you mute it, of course, this is a mute. I don't have to explain it. And the other one will invert the face. One more thing, on the top you can see the M and the S and then solo. So if I click it, I'm just getting the mono. And if I do S, it's the sides. Now, does this mean that I can mix or use this plugin to mix mid-side? No, this is just to audition whatever it is that you're doing. That's all. It's just to audition. Now, when you start using this plugin, the left channel is going to be a little bit different from the other one. And you can see it right here. It says channel 1 and then channel 2. Now, when I boost or use something or start using this plugin, even if I do filters, I'm going to turn them on and just move them around, you can see that we have some lines that are separating right here. You have the blue light line and then you have the purple. So one is the left channel and the other one is going to be the right channel. So since this is an analog emulation, both channels are not the same. So we have a little bit of separation or dispersion between the two plugins. The two instances, left and right. And this is, again, normal for a hardware type of gear. And if you have hardware, you know that whenever you use something on the left and something on the right, which is, again, dual mono, you need to adjust it just a tiny little bit, and both images are not going to be entirely the same. So this is normal, and this is what they did. They emulated different versions of this console, of the same console, with all the different variations that you could get. Now, this is called TMT, which is Tolerance Modeling Technology. This, I guess, is from Plugin Alliance or Brainworks. Now, the cool thing is that you can choose different combinations of both channels, and all of them are just a little bit different. And this is just, to get that analog type of vibe that you get with analog. And notice that these ones are just really different. So if you want a little bit more of analog vibe, you leave this alone, or maybe you choose a combination, but you can also go to the random channel. This one will just pick one for you. And if you have multiple instances of this plugin, you can click all, and this will just randomize all. Still, it works fine, but the problem is that what if you don't want this behavior? You can go to the stereo mode, and you can click it and disable it. Now, instead of using two different channels or two different emulations, you're going to be using just one. In this case, is 5 for the left and 5 for the right. Still, if you keep switching, all the different variations on the different knobs still apply because we have different curves for all of them. But you don't have the difference between the left and the right. And again, all this is just completely up to you. And okay, so let's talk about the dynamics section. If you have a lot of experience, I'm not going to teach you anything new right here. These controls are very simple. You have your ratio that can go from 1 to 1 all the way up to limit land. Because, this is a very simple control if you have experience. If you go up on the threshold is how much you're compressing. As you do more and more, right here the LEDs will let you know how much you're compressing. Since we are going up, we might need to level down the plugin just to compensate the gain. The more you go, the more you compress. Now then, of course, you have your release. It can go all the way from 10 milliseconds all the way up to 4 seconds. Now on this plugin, you don't have an attack control. You have your fast attack, and by default, it's not on fast. It's going to be from maybe 1.53 milliseconds up to 30 milliseconds because it's program dependent. If I turn on the fast attack, it's going to be around 3 milliseconds. And that is how it's just crashing everything. So I might need to go up. And now everything sounds super fluid. More dynamic. Less dynamic. And then you have the knee. And this is about this P button that you have right here. By default, the knee, it's soft. It's called the over easy. And maybe you can recognize this from, the DBX compressor. But when you turn it on, it's going to be a heart knee. Alright, so this is what this plugin can do. Now, if I turn this off, right here you have the link. You can link both channels. I'm gonna give you an example in a minute if you don't know what it is. And just like any modern plugin, you can blend the wet with the dry signal. So you can do parallel processing on this plugin directly. If I really crush it, and I'm really crushing it, I can go to the mix control, just, go down and get to just a little bit of that, super crushed sound. Crushed, a little bit less. And on top of that, you have your high pass filter, which is going to be just like this one. We're going to talk about this with the dynamic section, but you can filter the low frequencies starting from nothing all the way to 200k, which is a lot. Alright, so I'm gonna go back to reset. Okay, so you can find a lot of videos on YouTube playing sounds and just compressing. This is not what I want to do. I want to be as visual as possible. Still, in real life, you will be using your ears, but this guide targets all audiences. So now I'm going to be showing you different sources like a kick, or maybe some tambourines or some hats, and show you how we can use the compressor to get the most out of this. And all of this is again because I am assuming that you're starting and you're learning compression. The nature of this compressor is being snappy. Now, what I did, I just created a kick with a lot of body, so we can start compressing and see how we can shape the waveform. The one at the bottom is the unprocessed signal, and the one at the top is the one that we are just processing with the dynamic section. Now, if I go all the way down to the release, I have the fastest release. We just need to keep going up on threshold so we can start compressing. And as we go up, that is that the kick starts to change, the waveform starts to change. Of course, when you go up, it's going to go louder. In this case, you need to compensate the gain with this tiny slider. And notice how it changes. Keep going up, I'm going to go a little bit more aggressive. And this is what we get. So we get a lot more punch. That's why the initial transient and the body goes down. So now we have a much more snappy kick. We are removing that oomph, the initial body, and then we are just getting more snap, more click, let's say. If I go all the way up and, go crazy, it's even more noticeable. Let me just adjust the gain. There we go. Notice the difference. How much going up with almost default values is shaping the kick. Super snappy. No body, no oomph. Now, of course, I'm going all the way crazy on this one. I'm going to go to something more normal, like, maybe 50% right here. And I need to go back and compensate the gain. We are still getting that initial transient, that, kick, the click at the beginning. We have less body. Gonna go maybe there. There we go. That's fine. I guess that's fine. When I go up on the release, we're gonna start pushing the kick a little bit behind, or a little bit backwards. So now, right now, we can still hear a little bit of that oomph. If I go up on the release, we start losing that oomph. And we get more of the initial hit. If I go down, more oomph, less oomph. What about the fast attack? I'm going to go all the way down to the release and I'm going to play that kick again. I'm going to stay around, 50% right here. As soon as I turn the fast release, the fast attack on, you're gonna really notice the difference. Notice how different it is. Since it's a fast attack, still, it's not super fast, so we can see that tiny little peak, pause it right here. We can see that peak right here. But then, of course, we get the body again. And if I match the volume, if I go up, notice that we got that oomph back again. So we have a more transient, like at the beginning. But then, we get that oomph back again. If we want to get rid of that oomph, remember that we need to go up on the release. And we're going to smooth that oomph out. Still, we still get it, right? But we get a little bit less. If I go down, more oomph, a little bit less. Now, all of this depends on what you want to do and the material that you're trying to compress. And right, I'm going to start with a reset, and I'm going to be playing a clip. So these are some tambourines, and I made them on purpose so we can hear and see the peaks, the accents, and the non-accents. I, again, did this on purpose so we can use the compressor and just glue or trying to bring everything together. If I want a little bit more of whatever it is that we are getting right now, it's a good idea to maybe go down on the release and go up on the threshold. We're going to start getting more, and we can see it right here at the top. If I go down and try to match the levels, we are just getting more of, what we had already. What I want to do, I want to bring everything together. So in this case, I guess it's a good idea to use a fast attack. Now, when this is enabled, I'm going to go up on the threshold just to crush it. And we can hear the now and see that now everything's just way, way closer. So I'm just I want to say gluing, I'm just hard compressing everything so everything can sound together. Still, we can hear the accents and the non-accents, but now the non-accents, the in-betweens, are going to be really close to the other ones. If I go down and go up in volume, it's super dynamic. If I hard compress, it's going to be less dynamic, and that's the point. And right here you need to choose what you want to do, because maybe this is just a little bit too much. If I go down, I can compress, still compress, keep it dynamic, but a little bit more, I'm going to say reasonable, but a little bit more normal. Because right here, if you take a look at the the levels, we are going crazy, and sometimes compressing this hard is gonna take whatever clip that you're trying to compress, maybe to get artifacts or just unwanted sounds or noises. This is something that you don't want. Now, if you want this overhyped type of sound, go crazy. Then just match the levels. Just completely up to you. In my case, if I wanted to do maybe something like this, like bring everything together and just make it glue, maybe this tiny transients and peaks, and the accents are just maybe way too much, I will go to the clip and manually adjust them so I don't have to do something like this with a compressor, because I'm making it work really, really hard, and this is maybe way too much. Another thing you can do, if you're crushing it, always remember that you have a mix control. So you can just go crazy, smash it, and then just go down on the mix and just get a little bit of whatever it is that you want to do, and you still keep a dynamic sound, still dynamic. You get a little bit more out of this. The mix is super important. The difference between the mix is this, and maybe 50 or 30%. Sounds cool. It's a bit better. Okay, so I'm gonna play some drums. On the Wave Observer, you can see the left now and the right. And if you notice, I have some snares, and the snares are panned all the way to the left. And this is why what I want to show you right now. We need to talk about the link. So when you are compressing stereo source, in this case, when this is not on, it means that the compression is going to react to the left, you have the left channel reacting to the left and the right channel reacting to the right. I guess it makes sense. Because in this case, the left channel is a little bit more aggressive when this snare hits. So we can see that it's just, working a little bit more and reacting to the snares. Now, sometimes you don't want this. You want for the compressor to compress a little bit more evenly for both sides. So this is why you link the channels. When you link it, and it's going to go on, the light goes on, and you can see only one single row. And this is because it's taking an overall of both channels, and it's compressing now the same for both channels. For left and right, it's doing the same amount of compression. It's compressing the same. So it's a bit more consistent when compressing. Because we are doing the same. If we go to unlink, the compression at the left, it's completely different than the compression at the right. So this is what the link means. Okay, let's talk about the dynamic sidechain, this button that we have here, and at the bottom we can see the SC, which means sidechain. If I play a clip, the dynamic sidechain means that it will be put or placed within the sidechain. And again, maybe you're starting, so I'm going to be showing you an example. I'm going to go slow, fast release, and I'm going to compress. And I'm going to go aggressively so we can, really hear the difference. So when we take a look at the slides, we can really hear that the compressor is reacting more to the kick and the snare. I guess, it makes sense. So sometimes, if I want to crush it even more, it's overworking when we get the kick and the snare, and that's normal. But maybe I want to remove or just let the compressor know that I don't want to compress that hard when the kick and the lower frequencies of the snare hits. So this is why we get these HPF high pass filter. We are removing or cutting the lower frequencies so we can have the compressor react to the higher frequencies more than the lower frequencies. And now the compressor is not compressing super hard because it's reacting less to the kick and the low frequencies of the snare. That's the point. So if I have to give you an example, it's like us telling the compressor to compress that and react less to the lows and the snare. So this is what the compressor is listening behind the scenes. Now you get this option right here, the high pass filter, which works almost like this one, like using this. So what is the point of the dynamic sidechain? When I enable this in the filter, for the filter, now the filter, we cannot use it anymore for the rest of the chain. This is going to go into the dynamics sidechain. So now the filter, the compressor and the gate will be listening to whatever we do right here with the filter. So if I wanted to compress and then chop the lower frequencies so we can have the compressor compress a little bit less harder, notice that is happening. So we are doing the same thing we did right here at the bottom. If I go down, it's crazy. If I go up, it's less. But now, since we could already do it with this control, but then if I want for the compressor to react less to the higher frequencies, now right now this plugin has a problem. I think it's my DAW. Notice I'm turning it off and sometimes it goes back on. If I turn this one on, now what we are doing, we are filtering or removing the high frequency. So the compressor, it's only reacting to the low frequencies, which, it makes sense. We have a lot of that. I'm going to turn it off. So this is what the sidechain will do when this is enabled. It's part and it goes before the dynamic section. So we influence how the dynamics or how the compressor is going to work. This also works for the gate. It's part of the compressor. Now, then at the bottom, we have this sidechain. By default, it's off. I'm going to go back to reset, but by default, this one is off. So when we enable this button, we go on and we compress. Now, the EQ works just like the filter when in dynamics sidechain. If I boost, maybe I boost the low mid frequencies, notice the compressor goes crazy. And it's because I'm boosting at 9K800. I'm gonna go maybe lower to 300. I'm boosting 300, so we are boosting before compressing. Of course, we don't hear it because only the compressor can hear it. We are putting the EQ within the sidechain, just like we did with the filters. And now you can have the compressor maybe react less to low frequencies and react more to high frequencies, or maybe have it react more to, the mid frequencies. And then you can also do the opposite. If you want the compressor is reacting way too much to mid frequencies, well, you go here, you put it in the sidechain, and you go down, and it's gonna react less to those frequencies. That's the whole point of putting something on the sidechain. Okay, so now it's time to talk about the expander and the gate. And this might be a little bit boring if you already know what it is and how it works. If we have something dynamic, we might compress to make it less dynamic. Just like before, the red one is the unaffected, and the one at the top, which I don't know which color is, pink. We're gonna use the compressor, the expander, and the gate and everything else just to compress the one at the top. Some hits are softer, which are the in-betweens, and some hits are just louder, and we can see them right here on the waveform. So, what I want to do, I want to bring the peaks down and try to make everything sound together. So I want to compress. I want to reduce the dynamic range. I'm gonna go right here. I'm gonna do it very aggressively so we can really notice the difference. I'm gonna go really hard and fast attack. No super fast release, going all the way. And I'm gonna go all the way up. And I'm just gonna crush it. If I'm gonna go down in volume. So what I'm doing, I'm catching the peaks, the louder parts. I'm bringing them down. And therefore, we take the non-loud parts and we bring them up. So now everything's just, super, I want to say glued, but it's just, crushed. So we reduce the dynamic range. An expander is going to be the opposite of this. We don't compress the dynamic range, we expand it. So let me give you an example. Let's say that, and I'm going to pause this so we can keep this in mind. Let's say that, someone sends a file that we need to use, right, to do some mixing, and the file is just like this, is the one we have at the top, right? Everything is super crushed. So what we want to do is we want to get those accents back. Like, the waveform that we have at the bottom. We want to get this back. But of course, so this is the file that we get. We cannot record it. We cannot go back. Now, first, you need to click this light. And now you are in expander mode. And this works almost like the compressor. You need to go up on the threshold. I'm going to play this back. And I'm going to play the hats. You need threshold to find the sweet spot. And the range is how much of this you're gonna be doing. As you keep going up and up, I'm gonna go almost there. So now we get the accents back, right? So this is what we would do with even a gate or an expander. We take the loudest parts, we don't compress them, but we bring the other parts down. If you go up on the range, I'm gonna go down on the release. And I'm going to go up on the range as we do more, of course. And now we have the accents, and the in-betweens are just very soft. So we are separating the accents from the non-accents, making it more dynamic. Remember, not very dynamic, a lot more dynamic. And we expand the dynamic range, so that's why it's called an expander. Now, since this is an emulation, we get the most common controls. The range is going to be, again, how wild you go. If I go all the way up, we are getting the accents, and everything else goes down. But if we want to do just a little tiny, we can go down in the range and still, get the accents. We can hear them. So, in conclusion, it depends on your sound. You need to move the threshold, find the sweet spot, then decide how much you want to do. If you want to smooth it out, you need to do more release. So you also have the fast attack. This works just like the compressor. If I click it now, it's going to be a little bit more reactive to, the transients, the initial transients are going to be a little bit more pronounced. But again, it all depends on the source that you're trying to process. the hold will do something for the gate. I'm going to show you in a minute. But first, let's try to do that gating. I'm going to maybe go down in the range and go down on the threshold. And I'm going to play back to the beginning. And maybe, you know what? I'm going to reset the fader. So remember what we want to do. I want to let pass the loud part. And I want to remove the soft parts. So, you need to do some threshold to have the gate. And at some point, you, of course, need to go up in range how much down you want to go. And at some point, if I go up, it's going to remove everything. So you need to find the sweet spot. There we go. Because it's right here. So notice what happens now. And I'm going to go up in range. So we are just getting the accents. And it's pretty much, removing everything else. And it's because, again, the gate is super hard. The expander is soft. We get the in-betweens. In this case, we just get the accents. Now, of course, since this is a gate, it's going to open to let pass whatever sound we want. And then it's going to close very fast. That's why we have the release. If it's way too aggressive, we can go up in the release. We're just going to, make the closing a little bit less aggressive. This is why if I go up in the release, after every time it opens to let something pass, you can hear the second hit of the hat. If I go all the way up, it's going to be maybe way too... But, we are almost getting into the expander territory. And all of this, again, depends on what you want to do. Now, then in this plugin, you have the hold. Maybe I'm going to put it right here. You have this one. So this, what it will do, it will mean that it will wait a little bit longer before closing the gate. So I'm going to be playing it back. We have the transients and everything else is just being chopped. If I go up and hold, it just works a little bit like the release, but it's just very hard. It's not smooth like the release. If I go up on the release and I go, maybe softer, notice the lights, how it, instead of going fast all the way up, it goes smoothly up. Well, that's the release. If I remove the release, it's just super fast. Well, the hold, it's going to do something like this. It's going to be fast, but it's going to hold the gate open, or keep it open. But then it's going to close very fast. And that's the hold. Then you have this button at the bottom. It's going to say normal. So right now, this one works for the gate. Right now, we are working in normal mode. So again, we let pass whatever sound, and then we chop it down. We chop it out. Now, when I click this one, we are on inv, which means inverse or converted. It has different names. But notice the difference. Now we are listening to whatever it is that we are chopping out. We are not getting the accents. We are getting, the other thing that we are removing. If you learned something new and you like this, please like and subscribe. You have links at the description for PayPal, YouTube Thanks, and Patreon.